we're at the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference with Frank Knuetell of V2. Thanks for joining us today. The first thing I'd like you to do is introduce the company, what you do. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Absolutely. So V2 is a vertically integrated, multi-country operator of cannabis assets. By that I mean we operate assets from seed to sale, so cultivation, extraction, processing, and retail dispensaries. And we do that in multiple different countries, primarily at the moment Canada and the United States, where we operate in multiple provinces and multiple US states.
So tell me a little bit about the nuances of operating in both the US and Canada. I mean, it's pretty unusual to see a company operating in both countries.
Right, we're one of the few, if only, companies operating in both countries. And a lot of it is because of the legal issues that have continued to develop over time that has allowed us to make this step. So we acquired a Canadian operation at the end of November that provided us with the Canadian assets as part of our portfolio to join our US assets. So a lot of it has to do with the evolution of the legal environment. And frankly, even within both Canada and the United States, there's a lot of variability depending on the provinces and the states that we have to manage and tread through as we expand our operation.
So you went public in November, am I right?
That's correct.
What are the main challenges that you found as a publicly traded company?
It's actually, I guess, just the basic increase in scrutiny. Prior to being a public company, investors are illiquid. So as soon as we became public, there's liquidity, stock price issues, market cap. On top of that, there's also some legal constraints. So, for example, in Colorado, public companies can't own licenses. So we've had to manage through various state and provincial legal issues by virtue of being a public company that have required us to take extra steps to adapt to the different market needs.
So do you have any advice for medium-sized companies or large companies or small companies seeking to go public?
It depends on where their assets are located. So, for example, for companies that have US assets, you can't list on NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange, so you can list on OTC or in Canada. So there's some restrictions in that regard. And it's becoming increasingly difficult for companies, I think, to become public because of the access to capital, as well as the scale of some of the larger players. So there's a considerable movement now towards consolidation within the industry. And it's going to make, I think, smaller or mid-sized companies that are not public yet, it's going to be increasingly difficult for them to become public because the industry is consolidating around a bunch of larger players.
So you mentioned consolidation, you also mentioned it in a previous conversation. Seems to be a hot topic for you. You actually said, for me, 2019 is the year of consolidation. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So I think this is the year that two really prominent issues will arise. One is consolidation within the industry. So there is a movement towards larger footprint of assets and operations. So we have operations across Canada and into US states. Other of our competitors have multi-state operations in 8, 9, 10 different states, but not in Canada. And then there are others that have operations in different US states. So I think this is the year we're going to see consolidation within the industry such that various players who have non-overlapping assets combine their forces to create a much larger entity. As part of that, I think towards the middle or latter part of the year, they'll be focused on operational efficiencies, cash flow, and revenue growth. So on an organic basis versus an acquisition basis. So I think it'll be a year of consolidation within the industry and then an increasing focus on efficiency and cash flows.
It's a crazy industry and it's moving really fast. Think of how long it took for the auto industry to consolidate, right? From more than 4,000 brands to the handful we have today.
Right.
We're seeing this in cannabis within a year or two since the explosion of capital markets. Any thoughts on the speed at which this industry moves?
It moves unbelievably swiftly. It is a very dynamic, swiftly growing industry, and there is a expectation that scale is going to matter and footprint will matter, and as a result, I think it's driving a much faster level or rate of consolidation than you saw in previous industries. There is a very discrete knowledge and awareness. It's also a reasonably collegial industry, so while we are competitors, there is a level of familiarity and desire to work together to get to a point where we become a large dominant player. So I think it's a combination of sort of the understanding and combination of being a fairly collegial industry and the desire to reach a certain large footprint before any legislative changes occur in the United States, which would allow potential external entrants into the market. Think big alcohol, tobacco, food and beverages. So there's a race to get scale and efficiency before potential outside entrants hit the market.
Last question, what's next for Jardín?
So we're going to continue to expand our footprint. So we've got a wide access to the market in Canada. We've got 2 states in the United States. We're going to build out in additional states this year in the United States. We've also commenced operations in Europe. We have a research facility and an office in Barcelona that we're using as our launch pad to develop efforts in various markets in Europe, including Italy, Spain, and Germany.
Well, definitely something to watch. Anything you can reveal in terms of which markets you're looking at next in the US? You mentioned you're eyeing a few.
Sure. So, our goal is to enter markets where the regulatory environment has solidified and is not in flux, as it is, for example, here in Florida. Our desire is to enter markets where the regulatory environment has settled down, where there's existing real revenue opportunities, which allows us to manage our growth trajectory, our return on investment expectations, and also has a decent market size. So markets that hit that criteria, for example, are Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, further expansion in Nevada, and potentially Michigan, and ultimately if things settle down in Florida.
Well, excited to see what the future holds. Thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate your time.
Enjoy the conference, enjoy Miami. It's sunny out here.
Excellent, thank you.